All right, hey everyone. I'm going to go through pretty quickly and just talk about some of the basic features of the Cleanflight configurator. I'm going to be using Betaflight to do this because I think there's still some features of Cleanflight that haven't really been. There's some features of Betaflight that haven't made it back into Cleanflight yet, such as being able to disable the beeper under certain circumstances. So that's one of the reasons why I just haven't felt like I can switch back to Cleanflight, even though it's a little more stable. And plus, part of the fun of it, I think, is staying up to date with the new, with the new stuff. So I like Betaflights, and that's what I'll be using. So let me go ahead and start by plugging in the board. You should see this change to something up here. Um, and then hopefully when you click the connect button, it'll connect. So right off the bat, you're on the setup page. Let me mention this stuff up here because this is important. This multi-WAAAY API version, I don't know what that is, but this second line down here, flight controller, this tells you BTFL, that tells you you're running Betaflight, and I'm running 2.5.0. Specifically, I'm running the 2.5.0 RC4, and you have a whole lot of information here. This is github.com/borisbstyle/Betaflight. And then you can go to the releases page and see all of the different software versions that have been put out. Also, if you go back to the main page, you can go into the wiki here, which has a great, I'm not going to talk about how to tune PIDs, but I actually contributed by writing a lot of the instructions here for tuning PIDs. So I would definitely, if you're for anyone really, I would encourage you to read this and try it out next time you have a copter that you want to tune. It's probably probably pretty soon. So I covered that. Let's go back into the window and look at what we have. So you'll notice that I don't have anything lit up here, and that's because I like to disable as many of the sensors as possible. I don't use the accelerometer because I don't use angular horizon mode. There's no reason for anyone to have magnetometer or barometer enabled. If you have these two lit up in green on your Cleanflight configurator, I want you to look at yourself in the mirror and say, I am substandard, because I'm joking, but there's no reason to have the magnetometer and barometer lit up. Because we just don't use them. We don't use navigation features on a mini quad, and all they do is eat up resources. So turn those off, and I'll show you how to do that. The rest of this, I think, is self-explanatory. The ports here, if you're using an external black box logger, you want to enable that on the appropriate port. On UART2, which is it's just other pins on the board where you can connect peripherals. I have my multi-WAAAY OSD set up on the critter here, so that's where I have that so that it's able to communicate with the flight controller. And then also here, if you're using a D4R2 receiver, which is PPM, you don't have to enable anything here. You just tell it PPM on the next tab. But if you're using an X4R receiver, which is a S-bus based receiver, then you do have to specify where you're placing, which UART you're putting the receiver on, and then configure it in the next tab. Now I could easily, if I for whatever reason wanted to swap these two and put the OSD on UART3 and put my receiver on UART2, I could do that. I could desolder them, change the pins real fast, and then swap them in here, and it would be no different. So hopefully that's helpful. All right, configurations tab is where most of the stuff is. You have your motor configurator right here. Here's where you set up your board if you have it. If you have the sometimes if you have the USB port out to the side, you need to change the yaw degrees to probably 90 or 270, depending on whether it's on what side, what side it's on. One thing to definitely check: definitely check is to, and this is probably one of the only use, in my opinion, one of the only uses for the accelerometer, is to enable the accelerometer and go into the setup tabs here. When you have your accelerometer enabled and you move your copter like I'm doing, you will see this model moving. You want to make sure that as you move your model forward and backwards, this model on the screen reflects those same things. If it doesn't, that means that you probably have something that you need to change here. And I'm willing to bet it'll be the yaw degrees. So you might do it just trial and error, try 90 or 270, and that'll probably fix it. All right. This is the receiver mode. Like I said, if you're using the D4R, you would choose that. If you're using the spectrums, I really have no idea. I think you choose RX serial and then choose one of these spectrum ones down here. But I have no experience with spectrum. Really, I'm familiar with PPM, and then also RX serial. If you're using the X4R like I am on this one, then you choose S-Bus. GPS I don't use. The RSSI I don't use here. This is probably the most important right here, this ESC and motor features part. Always change the default of 1850 up to 2000. This gives you more resolution on your throttle, because I think that the reason why they had it set at 1850 is because I think some older, it's like a holdover from like olden days of flight controllers or ESCs, but for every modern-ish, basically every ESC that I've used for the last 2 years or whatever, you just want to set this at 1,000 and set the maximum throttle at 2,000. It's a little bit confusing because you would think that, hey, minimum throttle corresponds to maximum throttle. It's really not that way. These are the two values that get sent to your ESCs and tell it what the range is. Minimum of 1,000, maximum of 2,000. And then this is the value that your motors will spin at when you're armed. So you can change that anytime you want, but before you calibrate your ESCs, you need to set this range. I'll stress that, 1,000 to 2,000, and then calibrate. So I'll show you how to set minimum throttle also, because that's important. So this motor stop, I recommend you leave motor stop off just the way it is here. If you turn this on, that means that your motors will not spin when it's armed, and that can be dangerous because you don't have a visual indicator that your copter is armed. And you want that because you could accidentally touch the throttle and then all of a sudden it's spinning into your face. So my suggestion, leave motor stop off. Turn one shot 125 on most every copter. I bet you every ESC made in the last year definitely supports one shot. VBAT is on by default. I would leave it on. And then down here, there's not really a whole lot here other than this system configuration. This lets you set the loop time. Now, for most people running Betaflight, I would set this to 500. I'm testing 250, but I can kind of see that I'm not really keeping up. It's sort of between 240 and 260. It seems like it's fluctuating a lot, so I'm not entirely sure that I'm going to keep this super fast loop time. I think it's on the verge of not really working that well. So I suggest putting in 500, and 500, if you're using an F1 and WAAAY 32 board, you're probably going to want to disable everything up here to allow it to do that. But actually, I have to read up on it. But I'm pretty sure if you're using the on a WAAAY board, if you're using the accelerometer, you can still run a 500 loop time as long as you use, I'll go ahead and go down here, as long as you use the multi-wee rewrite PID controller. The Lux Float, some people prefer it for some reason, but it's slower because it uses floating point math, and the WAAAY 32 F1 board doesn't have the internal processor that handles floating point stuff very well. So it'll really slow down the board. If you're on an ACE32, use multi-WAAAY rewrite. You know, if you must, leave the accelerometer on, but preferably turn all of the sensors off. And then back here in the configurations tab, just put in 500 and you should be good. Matter of fact, I'll put in 500 just to see if it looks more stable. It probably should look more stable. Yeah, a little bit less fluctuation. I'll leave it that way for now. LED strip, since I have an LED that's connected to the flight controller, I want that turned on. And then black box, I have an external black box logger, so you need that on. These are features. Telemetry, I really wouldn't worry about. As far as getting telemetry back to the Tyrannus, it already sends back your signal strength anyway. So you can set up on your radio without doing anything on the flight controller and tell it to read the RSSI values to you periodically if you want to do that, or you can just have it as a display on your screen on the Tyrannus, but you don't have to set anything up for that. Only reason why you might want to turn on telemetry is if you really want to see your battery voltage on your radio, and then you have to set all that up. But I don't think that's enough of a reason to use it. So I think we covered that here. Failsafe, basically I leave everything at default except I choose drop instead of land because I want my copter to fall out of the sky. If I don't have signal or control, I want it to completely fall out of the sky. Oh, did my sensors turn back on when I changed loop time? That's interesting. Wonder why that is. Well, hey, good. And we can go back here. Good opportunity to show you how to disable sensors. Oh no, that's strange. I wonder if it is actually on or not. Anyway, mysteries with Betaflight. Betaflight mysteries, but I don't think it's that big of a deal right now. Because I can fix this and just make sure that they're off once I get down here to the CLI. The PID tuning, here's where you put in your roll, pitch, and yaw. Let me see if I can hide unused PIDs. Like I said, I mostly use multi-WAAAY rewrite. I have all of the PIDs that I've tuned up real nicely on the Krieger here. Here's where you would change the strength of your horizon angle and the transition of your horizon modes. Over here, this is important for setting up a board for the first time. By default, all of these values, the roll, pitch, and yaw rate, are going to be 0. You're going to want to bump those up. Like I use 7.7 and around 9 or 95. You know, it says 0.7 and 0.9, but I just tend to I just say 7. I don't know. I'm dropping the decimal part for some reason. But I would start with like 0.4 or 0.5 on roll and pitch, and then put yaw on like 0.6. And that would be I think that would be a good starting point, especially if you're going to be in rate mode. Or rate mode and acro are basically just the absence of angle and horizon mode. So that's how I'll refer to it. TPA, don't worry about. It's like an old feature that people don't use anymore. Same with TPA breakpoint. You can just leave those at default. Receiver tabs. Let me turn on my radio.
Welcome to OpenTX.
Okay, so wait, I have to Krieger. All right, so you should see that I have values there. What you want to do is move your radio. This is also another very, very important thing to do, like at the very beginning, which is to, number one, make sure that when you move the throttle, it corresponds with throttle. Same with roll and pitch and yaw. Step one. Make sure that you have some switches set up here so that you can control aux channels. Finally, if you move the throttle and it moves the roll or the pitch or something different, try some different ones of these. What do I have it set there? Okay, so I had it set on TA. Let's see. So that was the correct one. If I go to Futaba, okay, so that still looks right. Oh, I didn't click save. Ha. Here's the other thing. Anytime you make a change on any of these tabs, it doesn't make the change immediately. You have to click save. So don't forget about that. So for instance, I'll go to default here, click save, and then all of a sudden I'm moving my throttle and it goes to roll. I don't want that. I'm going to go back to this one, click save, and then now my throttle's back with the throttle. I'm sure that you've all figured all that out. But that's an easy thing to forget about, as well as the save button. The save button. I don't change throttle mid or throttle expo. I always add in a deadband, and what that deadband is if you see some flickering here, in very worst circumstances, you'll get like a 2 or 3 point flicker on these values. I just set a deadband of 5 on roll and pitch, and then on yaw you can have a separate deadband because some people like to run more. This just tells the flight controller to ignore anything that's smaller than a 5 or a 6 point change. So that kind of helps get rid of like unintentional movements from your transmitter. So, and it can also help avoid drift. If your copter tends to drift around on yaw a little bit when you're not giving it any input, maybe increase the deadband a little bit. And I'll do that because I think I noticed a little bit of drift on the other one. So that's what I usually go 5 and 5 or 5 and 7, both about the same. RC rate, always keep it at 1. That's another way that you can speed up all of the rates, but for simplicity and to avoid changes to the some sort of complicated scaling thing, they just say, hey, leave it at 1. RC expo, if you start getting into more rates or higher rates, you might want to add in more expo, which will, if you look at this curve right here, when I go from 7 to, let's say, 9, it makes the curve, see how it makes the curve steeper? That lessens the sensitivity at lower values. Pretend this curve is going this way, but it lowers the sensitivity at lower values, and then once you get out towards the end of the stick travel, it sort of makes your input accelerate. So it allows you to have less sensitive in the middle, less sensitive sticks in the middle, and faster on the outside, which is good. But I leave it at 7 because that seems to be fine for me. Also, there's a little bit of expo that you can do on yaw. I always just leave that at 0.2, and it has worked super, super good. The modes tab, also pretty important. What you have here are all of the different modes that you can do. And I noticed that since I have, apparently it thinks my accelerometer and barometer are on, which I will fix shortly, but it's added options for angle and horizon. If you disable those sensors, then you just won't see those modes as an option anymore. They'll disappear. Here's the other thing. Rather than using your sticks to let's say bring your throttle all the way down and yaw to the right is a way to arm your motors, I would always use a switch to arm. So what you want to do is, in order to get this to show up, I have to do this real quick. Don't hang up on me. Don't hang up on me. Let's see. Connect. It hung up on me. Hang on a second. Let me just disconnect. This happens occasionally. No big deal. Bring up Cleanflight again. Plug it in.
Telemetry recovered.
Connect again. Okay. And just a little interesting thing. When I arm It takes away the communication with the configurator if I have this enabled. So I'm going to turn that off while I show you this. That way I can make changes here without it messing everything up. So I have a switch here on ARM. If you're on the bench with no battery plugged in and you hit your ARM switch, you should see that light up. And then I have air mode on that same switch. It's a 3-position switch. So this is disarmed, this is armed with no air mode, and this is armed with air mode. And that's how I usually fly. The only reason I have a non-air mode armed position is for testing. So that's the way I have that. Also, I've been experimenting with Acro Plus, which I'm starting to really like. So I have another switch for that right behind the arming switch, and then down here I have a switch for my beeper. My beeper is kind of acting funky. So and also I have my LEDs set to, it says LED low. That'll actually turn off your LEDs while you have that switch in that position. And I think I have it that way just because I can hit my beeper switch and it will blink my LEDs, which might make it easier to find. It's my theory. I'm sticking to it. So that's pretty self-explanatory. What else here? Adjustments I don't use. It's a nifty feature that lets you change your adjust your PID values while you're flying. Seems kind of complicated, but Mark does it, so it can't be. I was gonna say Mark does it. It can't be that hard, but he does it successfully. I'm just not smart enough to try to figure it out. Motors tab. This is pretty important. So this is initial tuning stuff. Like, okay, so to start out with, first thing I would do, set maximum throttle, min command. Set those because that's going to determine the values that are here. If I turn this on here, you can see it goes from 1,000 to 2,000. That corresponds with those two values. Next thing I would do is go into the receivers tab. Make sure that all of your stick throws. Oh, I forgot to mention this. All of your stick throws should be from 1,000 at the bottom, 1,500 at the middle, and 2,000 at the top. And the way you change that, if you're on the Tyrannus, you go to the servos page, and you have to change the minimum, maximum, and middle point values. But you'll notice all of mine, 1,000 roughly, 1,500, 2,000. There we go, 2,000. Same with that. It's very important because, especially on yaw, if you don't have it set up correctly, you will drift. You'll get yaw drift. You'll have kind of imprecise control, especially on throttle. You want 1,000, roughly. Throttle doesn't have the spring in the middle, so roughly 1,500 in the middle, and then all the way at the top is 2,000. That's very important. That's step 2. Step 3 is to calibrate your ESCs. And you have to calibrate your ESCs anytime you change these two values. Very important. Anytime you change those two values, you need to calibrate your ESCs. So in order to do that, what you do is you first take your props off. I'm not going to actually calibrate my ESCs since I know they're calibrated, but you'll see exactly what it looks like here. So step 1, click this little button. Step 2, bring this slider all the way up to the top. And then you plug in a battery. And you should hear, you know what, actually, no, I'm not going to do it. My props aren't off. I know that I'm probably not going to spin the propellers up, but I was going to play a little song for you. Bring this all the way to the top, plug in your batteries, it'll go doo-doo-doo, doo-doo-doo-doo-doo-doo-doo-doo. And then after it plays a little song or whatever, you still have it plugged in, take your mouse cursor and just point it down here at the bottom and click. There you go. Click until it goes all the way down to the bottom. It'll play another song. And then as soon as it finishes with its little song, you unplug the battery. and unplug the battery, and then get rid of that. Now the very next thing you want to do after you calibrate your ESCs is you want to set your minimum throttle, which is this value here. So in order to do that, right after you calibrate, go ahead and plug your battery back in without doing any of that stuff. Plug your battery back in. After it's plugged in, hit that button right there. And then what you want to do is you want to slide this up just a little bit. So I'm going to slide it up to like 1026 and look at my motors without any props on and watch them. You can hit the arrow key. I'm hitting the arrow key on my computer, and you want to tap up to raise the value until all 4 of your motors are spinning smoothly without a whole lot of stuttering. So once you get to that point where all 4 of them are spinning kind of smoothly, let's say that I'm going up and 1034, they're all spinning and things sound okay. And when I go down to 1032, they start to stutter. That's the point that you're looking for. So go back to 1034 and add 10 at least. You don't want to go too high, but add about 10. So that's 1044. Look at your motors and listen to your motors. That should be, so then you can go ahead and stop that, unplug your battery. You don't need that anymore. But remember that number, because that 1044 number should be the number that goes into your minimum throttle. Now mine happens to be really low because my motors start spinning pretty well at 1022, 1020. So that's why I have it so low. But that's how, after you calibrate, that's how you determine what number should go into minimum throttle. Okay? I think that's all on the motors tab. Race transponder, not applicable for a lot of things. This LED strip, this is where I have set up my LEDs. And there's plenty of videos online for how to do this, but you can see these 2 are indicators. These ones are arm state and throttle, and then these 2 over here are indicators as well. So they make nice little blinky lights. Sensors, don't worry about that one. Tethered logging, don't worry about that one. Black box. Here I have an external black box that's connected to a serial port. And let me go ahead and re-enable that before I forget. It's connected to a serial port. These are serial ports. So let me save, reboot that. Okay. Once you have that for black box, once you have that defined here, well, only if you're using a serial black box. For any kind of black box, you still have to go down here and enable the black box feature. For using any kind of black box, you have to do that. You don't always have to go into the ports tab and do this one. Only if you're using an external one. If you're bored, a lot of boards have an onboard chip. You don't have to. All you have to do is enable the feature, choose the onboard chip, and you'll be good to go. If you're choosing the onboard chip, you can go to 100%, and that'll log every single iteration of the loop with no problems. You may want to slow it down just a little bit to get more onto your chip because the chips have a limited capacity, and at high loop times, those things it will fill up quickly. So you might only get 30 or 40 seconds of logging. But for me, I use an external logger with an SD card, and because that is a little slower, I can only log at 33% usually. So there's the. Didn't I do that? Yeah, I did do that. It's very important. Okay, yeah. I think that's just information there. Here's for the onboard data flash chip as well. If you, oops, see what this looks like. Okay, that's good. If you're using the onboard chip, here's where you can save the file to your computer, and you can erase the chip for use on the next time. Now, how much time is this? 30 minutes almost? Ooh, I gotta wrap this up. Okay, so this is the important stuff. All of it's important. This is the really good stuff. Go into the CLI. One of the things you want to do, just in general for when you get things set up, is to type in status. And here you can see, I'm not sure what the system uptime, why it's only 35. Oh, because my last reboot, so it was 35 seconds ago. This voltage, it's only because it'll show your voltage if you have a battery connected. My CPU says 70%, that's good. Any value below about 50% is good. If you get over 50%, that's a concern. Your CPU clock, this is how fast your CPU is running, what type of gyro you have on your board, the barometer that you have, and then your cycle time should correspond roughly with what you see down here, etc. I think that's about it. I2C errors, you shouldn't see too many of those. The other command that you really want to get familiar with is dump. And you can type that in anytime. Just type in dump, and then all of this stuff gets spit out. The important thing to remember is that all of these things, is that everything that you can find in these tabs over here have a corresponding command here. So for instance, you can just scroll through it and see all the different stuff, but the min throttle is the same min throttle that I set over here in the configurations tab. Same with the min command and max throttle. If you set values in here and type in save into the command box, it'll change the values that are in the configurations tab. So, and also there are many, many, many more values that you can change in the CLI than what exists out here in those tabs, simply because there's probably not enough space to accommodate them all. And who knows where you would put them anyway. So there's a lot of important stuff in here. I can't possibly go through everything, but I will show you what I have saved on the Krieger as far as being able to back up and restore your settings. So let me go ahead and do that. Let me go ahead. I'm going to disconnect from the board completely. I'm going into the firmware flasher here, and I'm going to do a full chip erase, which wipes out everything on the board. I would always use full chip erase, by the way. On the Dodo board and on the SPF3 board, I know that you need to use a manual baud rate of 115/200. On other boards, you don't necessarily have to do that, but if you're having trouble connecting to your board or flashing your board, try manual baud rate of that, and hopefully that'll fix your problem. So once you have full chip erase and then manual baud rate, if you need it, you just go to load firmware local. I've already downloaded the latest version right here, Betaflight 2.5.0 RMDO. That stands for Ready Made Dodo. This other one here is for the SPF3 Mini. So I don't want to use that. You don't want to flash the wrong one. Using the Dodo, it says it loaded local firmware, and then you want to just click on flash, and you'll see this board going across, or the progress bar going across. Now, I'm going to go into the place where I have my settings saved, and what this is, if you can see here, this is a collection of only the values that I've changed. So you can see this is a lot shorter than the overall dump that was put out in the Cleanflight configurator. But these are just the ones that I've changed, and I'll go through a couple of those. But it's gonna beep at me now. All right. So programming successful. Connect to the board. Is it gonna connect? No, okay, don't panic. Sometimes it just doesn't connect. So let me close Cleanflight. Disconnect. I just disconnected the USB cable. I'm going to open Cleanflight. plug the board in, and then click on connect. All right, now it should. I don't know why this thing still isn't moving. It's strange. Anyway, everything is set back to default. You can see here 1150, 1850, all the old values. I'm going to go into CLI. I already copied my Command A. I'm sorry, Command A. What? Copy that, and then paste it in here. Bam. Command V. There we go. So what it did is it just went and wrote all of that stuff to the board. Set ACC hardware none. Set baro hardware none. That disables all of the boards or all of the sensors, by the way. And then what I'm going to type is save. And then if you'll notice, I go back into configuration and I have all of my same values back. So let me show you what I have saved. So let me go into the CLI as well. Dump. Bear with me. Okay, let me scroll to the top here. So these are all the features here. The ones that are enabled are the ones that do not have a minus sign next to them. So you'll see that these are the features that I have enabled over here in the other tabs. What I want to do is, what I've done actually, is just to copy and paste the ones that don't have a minus and put them up here. That way when I paste that back in, it'll tell them, hey, enable these features. Just these ones. These are the only ones I need. That map, TAER, is that same one that I was using to change the, make sure that the throttle corresponds with throttle and pitch corresponds with pitch and so forth. This is, which I also have pasted here, is that says that, hey, I have, on serial 0, I have MSP and black box on the same one. My serial receiver is on the other one. I just copy and paste that up here. Same thing with the LEDs. When I had those 8 LEDs set up, you have to copy and paste the entire string of, or the entire LED settings, which is these 32 lines, 0 to 31, and then I pasted them up here. The color ones you don't need to change, or you don't need to save, because I didn't make any changes to like the basic color definitions. But if you wanted to program like custom colors, you could do that. This is for the LEDs. Aux channels. So aux channels corresponds to that corresponds to what your modes are. So if you want to be able to automatically restore all of these modes, here, you want to go into the CLI, type dump, look for your aux channels. You'll see that after about 3 or 4 or 5, depending on how many you have, it just looks all the same. Just copy the ones that look like they have something in them. Copy, and come on back. Come on back. There we go. Where did I paste those in it? I know they're in there somewhere. Here they are. I just put them in right here. You don't have to paste. You don't have to put them in any particular order. And then the other ones that I always do are the min check, max. Oh, I'm sorry. Min check and max check don't have. They don't have a value. They don't have a spot in the configuration tab. I think by default it's 1100 and 1900. My recommendation, without having a long story here, is to go 1020 and 1980. So that's why I have set min check equals 1020, max check equals 1980. This is true as long as your receiver values go from 1000 to 2000 on all channels. If it does that, just set these values and you'll be good to go. Min throttle, max throttle, min command. Those are all in here. I just want to copy and paste, copy and paste those out into your text file. Same thing with serial RX provider. That tells me S bus. Also, where is the fact that maybe I think serial RX provider that enables the serial. Actually, no, I already have. Okay, I had RX serial as a feature up here, and then this tells it to use S bus. So that's all you need to set. I set gyro LPF to off. Here's my dead bands. Here is how you disable. This is important. Here's how you disable the accelerometer, barometer, and magnetometer. Use these two at the very least. Use baro hardware equals none, mag hardware equals none. Just leave those in your backup file because you don't need the baro and you don't need the mag. Accelerometer, I will let you make your own determination on. I would disable it. It saves some resources. The failsafe stuff, I just have pasted. Where's the failsafe stuff located here? Failsafe. Here's the little block of commands that correspond with the failsafe. The only reason why I have it pasted in there is because that code rarely changes. And I think by default the failsafe procedure is off, and I want my copter to drop out of the sky, like I said. So I think there was just a change in the defaults that I made there. This sets the speed of my black box recording to the serial device. Remember, I said I had to go 33%. That's how this looks in the CLI commands. It sets that to 1 and that to 3, which is 33%. Beeper off flags is another very helpful value that you want to set. For most boards, this will prevent it from beeping when your receiver is not on or when your battery is not plugged in. I think what this does is it prevents it from beeping when it sees that there's the USB port is connected, but I'm really not certain about that. I just know that it doesn't beep at me on the bench when I have set beeper off flags equals 196. This is acro plus factor. I've been experimenting with those numbers, so I paste them in there. There's the aux channels. I already talked about those. Here, this is pretty important. These are your PID values. These are the ones I change the most. So anytime I usually make my changes in the PID tab, but when I want to save them to my backup file, I just copy and paste. Too easy. And then finally, there are other values in here, but I can't possibly talk about them all. Finally, the rates. Here's where you can set these. All correspond with what is set up over here in the it's in both the PID tuning and the receiver tab. So you have your RC rate of 100, which is the one, it shows up as 1.0. RC Expo. This is why I call them 70 and 50 and 70 and 50, because they show up like that here. But in the, let's say RC Expo 70, where is that? RC Expo. You see how RC Expo, it says 0.70 here. So that's just the, somebody should change that, but maybe there's some reason for why I can't do it. And then your roll, pitch, and yaw rate are right there. I just copy that whole block and throw it right into there. So wow, this has gone on a little longer than I thought it would, but I'm willing to take some questions. I don't want to go on any longer than this. So I hope that helped. To recap, I think the main things, make sure that on the receivers tab, this goes when you have your radio on.
Welcome to OpenTX throttle warning.
That it goes from 1,000 to 2,000. And I have some funny stuff going on there too. Why is this? Why? Okay. Anyway, hey guys, there's obviously still some little things in here, but like I said, main things: receivers tab, maximum throttle, minimum command. Get that set up. Set your minimum throttle properly. Calibrate your ESCs. Just don't use motor. Don't enable motor stop. It's dangerous. Disable the barometer. Let me go ahead and did it. I know it didn't enable. It couldn't have possibly. No, it did. See, I don't know why it does that. Anyway, I'm going to give some feedback on why that does that. I don't want it to be set on auto. I want it to be set on none. And then I click save. And then, blam, look at that. The barrel goes away. I'm going to do that same thing for accelerometer. So anyway, thanks for watching, guys. Hopefully that wasn't too long and boring, but hopefully that helps. If you have any questions, just, I'll post this on the Facebook, and of course I'll respond to any questions. Okay.